You call yourself a doctor?
My husband fired me in front of the entire hospital staff. Not in an office, not in a private meeting, not with dignity, not with kindness, not even with enough respect to close the door. He did it in the main lobby of St. Helena Medical Center, beneath the tall glass ceiling, while nurses, doctors, receptionists, orderlies, interns, patients, and visitors stood frozen around us. 1 minute, I was carrying a box of donated blankets toward the children's ward. The next, my husband, Dr. Malcolm Pierce, stood in front of me with his arms folded, his white coat sharp, his jaw tight, and his mistress standing behind him with a smile she did not even bother to hide. He looked me up and down like I was something that had been left in the wrong hallway. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You are fired." The box slipped slightly in my hands. For 1 second, I thought I had misunderstood him. "Malcolm," I said quietly, "not here." That only made him smile. That cold little smile he used when he wanted people to know he was in control. "Yes, here," he said. "You have embarrassed this hospital long enough." A nurse near the reception desk covered her mouth. Someone behind me whispered my name. I could feel every eye in that lobby turning toward me, watching, waiting, wondering if I would cry. I had spent 12 years inside that hospital, not as a doctor, not as a board member, not as anyone important according to Malcolm. I ran patient outreach. I organized charity drives. I helped families fill out financial aid forms. I sat with lonely patients whose relatives never came. I made sure the pediatric wing had toys, blankets, books, and snacks. I knew which nurse drank too much coffee during night shift, which janitor sent money home to his mother, which elderly patient pretended to sleep when he was afraid, and which single mother needed a quiet room to cry before signing discharge papers. But to Malcolm, I was only the outreach girl. Even though I was his wife. Even though I had worked there long before he became chief of surgery. Even though my father's name was carved quietly into the foundation documents of the hospital, he now strutted through like a king. Behind Malcolm stood Dr. Cassandra Vale, the new head of clinical operations, tall, elegant, perfect red lipstick, smooth black dress beneath her white coat. She was the woman he told me was just a colleague. The woman who stayed late in his office. The woman whose perfume clung to his shirts. The woman staff stopped talking about whenever I entered the room. She tilted her head and said, "Dr. Pierce is only doing what is necessary for the hospital." The hospital. My hospital. Not that either of them knew it. Malcolm took a step closer, lowering his voice but not enough to spare me. "You are not fit to represent St. Helena anymore. Pack your things and leave." A box of children's blankets pressed against my chest. My hands trembled, but I did not drop it. "What exactly am I being fired for?" I asked. His face tightened. "Insubordination, poor judgment, creating emotional disturbances, overstepping your position." Overstepping. That was the word. Not because I had done anything wrong. Because earlier that morning, I had challenged Cassandra in a staff meeting after she tried to cancel the free transportation program for low-income dialysis patients. She called it inefficient. I called it necessary. She said the hospital could not be run on sentiment. I asked if she had ever explained efficiency to a patient who could not afford a ride to treatment. The room had gone quiet. Malcolm had looked furious. Now he was punishing me where everyone could see. He wanted me small. He wanted me ashamed. He wanted the staff to watch him choose power over his wife and learn what happened to anyone who questioned him. So I did the one thing he did not expect. I set the box of blankets gently on the reception desk. Then I looked at him and said, "All right." His eyes narrowed. "All right." "Yes," I said, If you want me gone, I will leave. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Because Malcolm had expected tears. He had expected me to plead, to remind him of our marriage, to whisper that he was hurting me, to ask if we could discuss it at home, to protect his public image the way I had protected it for years. But I was done protecting a man who humiliated me for sport. I removed my hospital badge from my cardigan and placed it beside the blankets. The badge read, Evelyn Pierce, Community Outreach Director. I touched the name once. Then I turned and walked toward the entrance. Behind me, Malcolm said, Evelyn. I stopped but did not turn around. His voice sharpened. You forgot your box. No, I said. Those blankets are for the children. I never took what belonged to patients. Then I walked out. But what Malcolm did not know was that, before sunset, my father's attorney would call the emergency board meeting he had spent 3 years trying to avoid. And by morning, the whole hospital would learn the truth. Dr. Malcolm Pierce had not fired a powerless outreach worker. He had publicly humiliated the woman who owned St. Helena Medical Center. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever been embarrassed by someone who thought your kindness made you weak, stay with this story. Because sometimes the person they throw out of the building is the only reason the door stayed open. My name is Evelyn Pierce now, but before marriage turned my name into a shadow behind a man's title, I was Evelyn Hartwell. I was born in a small town outside Atlanta, in a house that always smelled faintly of antiseptic, lemon polish, and my mother's soup. My father, Dr. Jonah Hartwell, was a surgeon, not the flashy kind, not the kind who loved cameras, speeches, titles, or rooms full of people clapping because he wore a white coat. He was quiet, too quiet for some people. He had long hands, tired eyes, and the habit of pausing before answering any question, as if words were medicine and he did not want to give the wrong dose. My mother, Grace, was a school nurse before her illness took her away from work. She had the warmest laugh in any room and the firmest hands when children tried to pretend they were not sick. She believed care was not only what happened in hospitals. Care was soup left on a porch, a ride to an appointment, a phone call before someone became lonely enough to stop expecting one. My parents taught me that healing was larger than medicine. My father used to say, a hospital that treats the disease but ignores the person has only done half its job. That sentence built my life. It also built St. Helena. When I was a child, St. Helena Medical Center did not exist. There was only a failing county clinic on the edge of town, with flickering lights, cracked floors, underpaid nurses, and patients who waited too long because better hospitals were too far away or too expensive. My father worked there 3 nights a week after leaving his main hospital job. He never talked about it like charity. He called it debt. Debt to whom? I asked once. He was washing his hands at the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled up, his face heavy with exhaustion. To the people who keep this country alive while others pretend not to see them, he said. I did not understand then. I do now. Over the years, my father began buying pieces of that failing clinic through a private trust. Slowly, quietly, he brought in donors, bought equipment, paid off debts, recruited doctors who still had souls, built partnerships with churches, schools, and shelters. He found a retired contractor to help renovate one wing. He convinced a foundation to fund maternal care. He begged, negotiated, prayed, and worked until the clinic became something more. St. Helena Medical Center. People thought it belonged to a board. Technically, it did. But the controlling ownership sat inside the Hartwell Health Trust, a private structure my father created to protect the hospital from being sold to the kind of corporations that see patients as numbers and nurses as costs. I did not know the full truth until much later. As a girl, I only knew my father worked too much and came home with stories he carried carefully. Not gossip, never names, just lessons. A woman who walked 3 miles after cleaning offices because she could not afford a taxi. A child with asthma whose mother cried because medicine cost more than groceries. An old man who kept apologizing for needing help. My father would sit at the dinner table, silent for long stretches, and my mother would place her hand over his. That was how they loved. Not loudly. Steadily. When I was 16, my mother got sick. At first it was fatigue, then weight loss, then tests, then words adults said quietly in hallways, as if whispering could make them less cruel. Cancer. My father became both doctor and husband, which is a terrible thing for any person to endure. He knew too much. He recognized every shift in her skin, every lab value, every pause in the oncologist's voice. But he still made her tea every morning like routine could fight death. My mother spent her last months teaching me things she knew I would need. How to cook rice without measuring. How to write thank you notes. How to fold fitted sheets badly and not care. How to recognize when a man loves being needed more than he loves the person needing him. One evening, while I sat beside her bed, she touched my wrist and said, "Evelyn, never confuse being useful with being loved." I cried because I knew she was dying. I did not know she was also warning me. After she passed, my father became quieter than ever. But he did not collapse. He poured his grief into St. Helena. A pediatric wing opened in my mother's name. Grace Hartwell Children's Center. I was 19 when the ribbon was cut. My father let me hold the scissors with him. Reporters came. Donors smiled. Nurses cried. My father said only 9 words into the microphone. Let no child be treated according to their parents' wallet. That was all. The next day, he went back to work. I studied social work in college, not medicine. That disappointed some people. Not my father. He said, hospitals have enough people who can read scans. They need more people who can read faces. I started working at St. Helena after graduation, not because my father owned the controlling trust, but because I believed in the place. I began in patient support, then community outreach. I organized food programs for discharged patients, transportation for dialysis, translation help for immigrant families, emergency funds for mothers whose bobbies needed extended care, volunteer reading hours in pediatrics. The work was not glamorous. It was holy. Then I met Malcolm Pierce. He arrived at St. Helena as a surgical fellow with a reputation already following him. Brilliant hands, sharp mind, difficult personality, that was how people described him. Difficult. Another word used to soften arrogance when a person is talented enough. Malcolm was beautiful in the way ambitious men can be beautiful before they begin to rot from the inside. Tall, focused, charming when he chose to be. He walked through hospital corridors like he was late for destiny. The first time we spoke, he was arguing with a nurse near the surgical desk because a patient's family kept asking for updates. "They need to wait," he snapped. I stepped in. "They have been waiting 6 hours. He turned to me, irritated. "And you are?" "Someone who knows their daughter is in surgery." His eyes narrowed. Then unexpectedly he smiled. "You're Hartwell's daughter." "I'm Evelyn." "Same thing around here, isn't it?" I should have disliked him. Part of me did. But Malcolm had a way of turning conflict into attention, and attention into something that felt like intimacy if you were not careful. He apologized later. Not publicly, not to the nurse, to me. "I was under pressure," he said. There it was. The first excuse. I accepted it. Malcolm pursued me with focus. He brought coffee to my office, asked about outreach programs, volunteered twice at a free clinic, and took pictures with children that made staff call him sweet. He listened when I spoke about my mother's pediatric wing. He said he admired purpose. At 27, I believed him. My father did not. He never said Malcolm was bad. That was not his way. He simply watched him the way surgeons watch vital signs. One Sunday, Malcolm came to dinner at our house. My father cooked stew badly because my mother had been the cook. Malcolm praised it beautifully, too beautifully. After Malcolm left, I asked, "What do you think?" My father washed bowls at the sink. "He has excellent hands." "That's good." "Yes," he said, "but I am more interested in his heart." I sighed, "Daddy." He looked at me. A surgeon's hands can save a life. His pride can endanger many. I did not want to hear that. Love often begins by asking wisdom to lower its voice. Malcolm and I married 2 years later. The wedding was held in the garden behind St. Helena, near my mother's pediatric wing. Nurses came. Doctors came. Patients my father had treated years before sent cards. My father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Malcolm's family arrived like visiting royalty. His mother, Vivian Pierce, wore deep purple silk and looked around at the hospital garden with mild disappointment. She came from a long line of people who believed medicine was noble only when practiced in private hospitals with valet parking. She had wanted Malcolm to join a prestigious surgical group in Boston, not bury his genius at St. Helena. She tolerated me because of my father's name. But she never respected my work. At the reception, she said, "Evelyn has such a generous little role at the hospital. It will be good for Malcolm's image." My father heard her. He looked at Malcolm. Malcolm looked away. That was the first warning after the wedding. Not Vivian's insult. Malcolm's silence. For the first few years, marriage was manageable. Malcolm worked long hours. I did too. We understood hospital life, missed dinners, late calls, emotional exhaustion. We learned to celebrate anniversaries on random Tuesdays because emergencies did not care about calendars. Malcolm rose quickly. Attending surgeon. Department lead. Director of surgical innovation. Then chief of surgery. Everyone said he earned it. In many ways he did. Malcolm was talented, focused, fearless in the operating room. He could perform complex procedures with a steadiness that made other surgeons trust him. But outside the operating room, something changed. Or maybe power removed the need to hide what had always been there. He stopped asking about my work. Then he started calling it soft work. Then when he was angry, he called it charity theater. "You hand out blankets and call it health care," he said one night. I stared at him across the kitchen. "I sit with families you do not have time to look at." He laughed coldly. "I save lives, Evelyn. So do nurses. So do social workers. So do bus drivers who get patients to chemo. So do interpreters who prevent deadly mistakes." He shook his head. "You sound like your father." Once that would have been praise. From Malcolm, it had become accusation. My father aged quietly. His hair turned white. His steps slowed. He retired from surgery but remained involved with the hospital trust. He came to St. Helena twice a week, walking the halls, speaking with nurses, noticing everything. He noticed Malcolm too. One afternoon, he came into my office and closed the door. "Evelyn," he said, "is he kind to you when no one is watching?" I looked down at my desk. The answer was too heavy. "He is under a lot of pressure." My father's face changed. Not anger. Sadness. Pressure does not excuse a person from love. I said nothing. He placed a sealed envelope on my desk. If there comes a day when St. Helena no longer feels safe for the people it was built to serve, open this. What does that mean? You will know. Daddy, you're scaring me. He touched my cheek. I am trying to prepare you. 2 months later, my father died in his sleep. Peacefully, they said. I hated that word for weeks. Peaceful for whom? Not for me. Not for the nurses who cried in supply closets. Not for the janitor who placed a flower outside his old office. Not for the patients who still asked when Dr. Hartwell would come by. The hospital grieved him. Malcolm performed grief well. He stood at the memorial service, placed one arm around my waist, and spoke about my father's legacy. People cried. Vivian dabbed her eyes. The board chair praised Malcolm's words. But after the service, when we got home, Malcolm loosened his tie and said, "Now the hospital needs to move forward." I turned to him. He was buried this morning. I know, but institutions cannot live in mourning forever. Something in me went cold. The next year changed everything. Without my father's physical presence, Malcolm grew bolder. He began pushing for modernization, expansion, private partnerships, executive restructuring. Some of it sounded reasonable. Hospitals do need money. Equipment costs money. Staff salaries cost money. Care costs money. But Malcolm's version of progress had a pattern. Cut the programs that served poor patients. Expand the departments that attracted wealthy ones. Reduce transportation assistance. Increase premium surgical suites. Rebrand charity care as community burden. Bring in consultants. One of those consultants was Dr. Cassandra Vale. She arrived wearing confidence like armor. She had a background in hospital administration, private equity partnerships, and clinical operations. Her resume was impressive. Her smile was careful. Her eyes were cold. Malcolm introduced her in a leadership meeting. Dr. Vale understands what St. Helena must become. Must become. Not could become. Not should become. Must. Cassandra spoke for 40 minutes about efficiency, patient flow, profitability, and strategic service lines. She had slides, charts, clean phrases for ugly things. She called the free transportation program non-revenue leakage. She called extended family counseling emotional excess. She called the charity pharmacy fund financially undisciplined. I sat there feeling my father's hospital slipping under a language designed to make cruelty sound intelligent. After the meeting, I told Malcolm privately, "She does not understand St. Helena." He looked at me with tired irritation. "She understands healthcare. She understands billing." He leaned back in his chair. "This is why I did not want you in executive meetings. I am outreach director. You are sentimental. I know the patients. You know sob stories." That sentence hurt so badly I could not speak. Malcolm saw it. For 1 second, something like guilt crossed his face. Then his phone buzzed. Cassandra's name flashed on the screen. He took the call. That was the marriage. By spring, everyone knew about them. Not officially. Hospitals are full of whispered knowledge. Nurses see, receptionists see, janitors see, residents see. People notice who leaves the same office late, which doctor's schedule suddenly overlaps with which consultants travel, whose perfume remains in a call room, whose name appears too often. No one told me directly. They did not need to. I found one earring in Malcolm's car. A black pearl. Not mine. When I held it up, he did not even try hard. Cassandra dropped it during a site visit. In your passenger seat. He sighed. "Evelyn, if you are going to turn every object into evidence, I cannot help you." I laughed then. It surprised both of us. because the sentence was so perfectly Malcolm. The object was not evidence. My noticing was the problem. Things worsened at the hospital. Cassandra began removing staff from programs she considered unnecessary. A beloved nurse coordinator was reassigned. 2 translators had hours cut. The charity clinic schedule shrank. Patients began calling my office in panic. One elderly man, Mr. Alvarez, missed a dialysis session because transportation vouchers ran out early. He came in the next day dizzy and ashamed. "I did not want to bother anyone," he said. I went to Cassandra's office with the file in my hand. She did not look up immediately. That was deliberate. People like Cassandra use delay to remind you where they think you stand. Finally, she said, "Can I help you?" "Mr. Alvarez missed dialysis because your cuts disrupted transport." She folded her hands. "The program is being reviewed. People cannot pause kidney failure during review." Her eyes sharpened. "You are emotional. I am factual. You are attached to legacy systems. I am attached to patients making it to treatment alive." She smiled thinly. "You speak like someone who has never had to run a hospital." I looked around her office. My father's hospital. My mother's wing. My life's work. And I said, "You speak like someone who has never had to face a patient after your spreadsheet hurt them." That was the line that traveled. By morning, Malcolm knew. At 9 o'clock, he called a staff meeting in the main lobby under the excuse of announcing operational clarity. I thought he meant Cassandra would explain the program changes. Instead, he fired me. In front of everyone. The moment I walked out of St. Helena, the air felt strange. Too bright. Too open. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, badge no longer clipped to my cardigan. My phone buzzed again and again. Nurses. Volunteers. Unknown numbers. I did not answer. Not yet. I drove to my father's old house. It was still mine, though I had not moved back after his death. The porch light had burned out. The garden needed work. His study smelled like cedar, paper, and the peppermint tea he drank even though he hated the taste because my mother said it was good for him. The sealed envelope he had given me sat in the desk drawer, where I had placed it the day he died. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, then St. Helena has begun to forget why it was built. That does not happen in one day. It happens through small decisions made by people who call themselves practical. A ride is cut here. A translator is removed there. A nurse is silenced. A patient becomes a number. A hospital becomes a machine that feeds on suffering instead of answering it. I built legal protections for this reason. The Hartwell Health Trust controls St. Helena Medical Center. Upon my death, you became controlling beneficiary and voting authority. I did not tell you everything while I lived because I wanted you to serve the hospital before you owned it. I wanted you to know the names before you knew the power. I am sorry for the burden. But I trust your heart. Call Miriam Shaw. She has the documents. Protect the patients. Protect the staff. And if a man ever uses my hospital to make you feel small, remind him whose hands laid the foundation. Your daddy." I read the letter once. Then again. Then a third time through tears. Controlling beneficiary. Voting authority. My father had not simply left me memories. He had left me the hospital. The same hospital Malcolm had just fired me from. The same hospital Cassandra was trying to reshape into something my father would not recognize. The same hospital where I had placed my badge on a desk and walked out like I was powerless. I called Miriam Shaw. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," she said softly, "I wondered when this day would come." Miriam was my father's attorney and trust counsel. She was in her late 60s, with gray locks, sharp suits, and a voice calm enough to make storms feel organized. I had seen her at board events for years, but I never understood how closely she knew my father's plans. "I was fired," I said. "I know." That startled me. "How?" "The hospital called an emergency HR notice. Several board members alerted me, and Nurse Patel sent a message that said, and I quote, 'Dr. Pierce has lost his mind.'" Despite everything, I laughed. It broke into a sob. Miriam let me cry. Then she said, "Come to my office, bring your father's letter." By 3 that afternoon, I was sitting across from her while she placed documents in front of me. The Hartwell Health Trust was airtight. My father had spent decades making sure St. Helena could not be easily sold, merged, stripped, or repurposed without the controlling beneficiary's consent. That beneficiary was me. The board managed operations, but certain actions required my approval. Major executive appointments, strategic restructuring, program eliminations tied to founding care obligations, and removal of any senior staff connected to protected community service roles, including mine. I looked up. Malcolm could not fire me. "Not without trust review," Miriam said. "He could recommend termination. He could suspend duties under specific circumstances. But public firing without process, especially by a spouse with conflict of interest and in retaliation for program advocacy, is a governance disaster." Governance disaster. My father would have loved that phrase. "What happens now?" Miriam smiled slightly. "Now we call a board meeting." The emergency meeting was scheduled for 8 the next morning. Malcolm spent the evening calling me. I did not answer. Then texting, "Evelyn, today was unfortunate. We need to discuss optics." "Optics?" "Not apology. Optics." Then, "Cassandra feels threatened by your behavior. You owe her professionalism." I stared at that one for a long time. Then, "Do not make this personal." I almost replied. How does a husband fire his wife in public and still believe she is the one making it personal? But I stayed silent. Silence had protected Malcolm for years. Now it protected me. At 7:40 the next morning, I arrived at St. Helena through the main entrance. The lobby changed the moment I stepped inside. People looked up from desks. Nurses paused mid-conversation. One orderly smiled like he was trying not to cheer. Nurse Patel, who had worked pediatrics for 22 years, walked toward me quickly and hugged me without asking. "You okay, baby?" she whispered. I closed my eyes. "I will be." Malcolm appeared near the elevators. He looked shocked, then angry, then careful because too many people were watching. "Evelyn," he said, "you should not be here." "I have a board meeting." His eyes narrowed. "With whom?" "With the board." He stared. Behind him, Cassandra stepped out of the elevator in a black suit, holding a tablet. She saw me and smiled like she expected me to be embarrassed. "Mrs. Pierce," she said, "this is not appropriate." Miriam Shaw entered behind me. "No," Miriam said calmly. "Yesterday was not appropriate. Today is governance." Cassandra's smile faded. Malcolm looked at Miriam. "Miriam, what is going on?" She did not answer him. She looked at me. "Ready?" I nodded. We walked past Malcolm into the elevator. The boardroom sat on the 10th floor, overlooking the city. I had been there many times to present outreach reports, usually seated near the end of the table with a stack of folders and a nervous hope that someone would listen. That morning, Miriam guided me to the head chair. My father's chair. I touched the back of it before sitting. Board members entered one by one. Some knew, some did not. Malcolm entered last, Cassandra beside him. His face went still when he saw where I was sitting. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "that seat is reserved." "Yes," Miriam said, "it is." He turned toward the board chair, Mr. Ellison, an older man who had always spoken kindly to me but rarely looked beyond my outreach reports. "What is this?" Mr. Ellison cleared his throat. "Miriam has requested an emergency trust governance session." Cassandra sat down slowly. Miriam stood. "For the record, I am Miriam Shaw, counsel for the Hartwell Health Trust. This meeting concerns unauthorized personnel action, violation of founding care obligations, conflict of interest in executive decision-making, and possible breach of trust-protected operational mandates." Malcolm laughed once. It was too sharp. "This is absurd. Evelyn is an employee." Miriam looked at him. "Mrs. Pierce is the controlling beneficiary and voting authority of the Hartwell Health Trust." The room went silent. Completely silent. Malcolm's mouth opened slightly. Cassandra's hand froze above her tablet. Miriam continued. "The Hartwell Health Trust maintains controlling ownership interest in St. Helena Medical Center. Dr. Jonah Hartwell designated Evelyn Hartwell Pierce as controlling beneficiary upon his death." A board member whispered, "Jonah left it to Evelyn." Miriam placed certified documents on the table. "Yes." Malcolm turned to me. "You knew." I looked at him. "Not until yesterday." His face changed. That made it worse for him. If I had known for years, he could have accused me of manipulation, but I had walked those halls like everyone else, worked, served, carried blankets, filled forms, sat with patients, let him mock my role, all while unknowingly holding the power he wanted. Cassandra recovered first. "With respect, ownership does not override operational necessity." "No," I said quietly, "but it does require accountability." Everyone turned toward me. My voice did not shake. "Yesterday, Dr. Pierce fired me publicly in the lobby without process, documentation, HR review, trust review, or board consultation. The stated reasons were vague, retaliatory, and connected to my opposition to cuts affecting vulnerable patients." Malcolm leaned forward. "You challenged executive leadership inappropriately." "I challenged a decision that caused a dialysis patient to miss treatment." Cassandra said, "That is an oversimplification." "No," I replied, "that is a human consequence." Miriam distributed packets. Inside were reports I had prepared over the past year: transportation usage, charity pharmacy outcomes, reduced readmissions tied to outreach follow-up, patient satisfaction improvements, cost savings from preventative support, staff statements, volunteer data. Every so-called soft program had numbers. My father taught me long ago that compassion should never be defenseless in a room full of accountants. As board members turned pages, the room shifted. Cassandra noticed. Malcolm noticed too. I continued. St. Helena was not built to become a luxury surgical brand with a charity plaque near the entrance. It was built to treat people whose names other hospitals forget. My father protected that mission legally because he knew one day someone would call it inefficient. Cassandra's jaw tightened. Malcolm stared at me like he had never seen me before. That was almost funny. I had been there all along. Miriam spoke again. Given the conflict of interest involving Dr. Pierce's marital relationship with Mrs. Pierce, his public personnel action, and concerns regarding Dr. Vale's proposed operational cuts, we recommend immediate suspension of the termination, formal review of Dr. Pierce's conduct, review of Dr. Vale's consultancy authority, and temporary freeze on program eliminations pending trust audit. Mr. Ellison looked pale. This is a serious step. Yes, Miriam said. So was firing the hospital owner in the lobby. No one laughed. But Nurse Patel would have. The vote took 2 hours. Malcolm argued. Cassandra argued better. They used words like strategy, modernization, competitive landscape, operational discipline. I listened carefully. Some points had merit, most were camouflage. Then I asked one question. How many patients will lose transportation access under your proposed model? Cassandra glanced at her notes. That depends on utilization categories. How many? She hesitated. Approximately 400 recurring patients may need alternate arrangements. And what alternate arrangements have been secured? Silence. That was the answer. By noon, the board voted to suspend my termination, freeze the cuts, and place both Malcolm and Cassandra under formal review. Cassandra's consultancy authority was temporarily limited. Malcolm was removed from personnel decision-making pending investigation. He did not look at me when the meeting ended. Cassandra did. Her eyes were cold enough to cut glass. This hospital will suffer if sentiment runs it, she said. I stood. No, Dr. Vale, hospitals suffer when pride runs them. She left without answering. Malcolm waited until the room cleared. Only Miriam remained near the window, pretending to review papers while listening to everything. He closed the door. Evelyn, he said. I gathered my folder. No, I haven't said anything. I know what you are going to say. His face tightened. You should have told me about the trust. I looked at him. That is what you want to discuss. He exhaled. I was blindsided. I almost laughed. You fired me in public, Malcolm. I was under pressure. There it was. The old god of our marriage. Pressure. I do not care. He flinched. For years, pressure had been enough to make me soften, enough to make me explain him to myself, enough to make me forgive tone, absence, cruelty, distance. Not anymore. I made a mistake, he said. No, you made a choice with an audience. His jaw worked. Cassandra pushed for decisive action. Then she knows you are easy to push. That landed. His face darkened. You are enjoying this. No, I said. That is the part you will never understand. I did not want power over you. I wanted respect beside you. He looked away. For a second, I saw the man I had married, or maybe the man I had invented so I could survive loving him. Evelyn, he said quietly, we can fix this. Which part? Our marriage. The hospital. Your reputation. Cassandra. He said nothing. So I did. You do not know what you are asking to fix because you still do not know what you broke. I left him there. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. It uncovered more than I expected. Not criminal scandal. Real life is not always that neat, but there were conflicts, undisclosed consulting incentives, program cuts tied to private partnership proposals, vendor favoritism, internal complaints about Cassandra's management style, staff intimidation, HR irregularities, Malcolm's misuse of authority in my firing. The board moved carefully at first, then decisively. Cassandra's contract was terminated. Malcolm was removed as chief of surgery, though allowed to remain as attending surgeon under supervision pending further review. That was Miriam's recommendation, not because he deserved softness, because St. Helena still needed surgical talent and patients should not suffer because leadership failed. That was the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge asks what will hurt him. Justice asks what protects everyone. Malcolm hated the decision. He had wanted power more than medicine by then, even if he could not admit it. Cassandra left the hospital quietly, but not before sending me one email. "You may own the building, but you do not understand medicine." I replied with one sentence. "Medicine without humanity is only technique." Then I blocked her. The staff changed after that. Not all at once. Trust, once frightened, returned slowly, but nurses smiled more. Translators regained hours. The transportation program was restored. The charity pharmacy fund was audited, strengthened, and expanded. I created a patient dignity council with nurses, social workers, janitors, billing advocates, and former patients. Doctors complained at first. Some said it slowed decisions. I said good. A hospital should slow down before stepping on people. I did not return to my old office immediately. I could have. The board offered me a senior executive title. I refused at first. Then Nurse Patel cornered me in pediatrics. "Baby," she said, "your daddy did not leave you that chair so you could stand in the hallway forever." So I accepted. Chief Mission Officer. It sounded too grand to me, but Miriam said titles matter because people respect paper before they learn to respect purpose. My first official act was to move my office to the ground floor near patient intake. Mr. Ellison asked if that was necessary. I said, if leadership cannot hear the lobby, leadership becomes dangerous. He did not argue. Malcolm moved out of our home 2 months later. Not because I asked him first. Because he could no longer stand living with a woman he had underestimated publicly and answered to professionally. He tried to talk several times. At first he was angry, then defensive, then tired. One evening he came by the house to collect medical books. I found him standing in my father's old study, looking at a photograph of Daddy breaking ground at St. Helena. "I hated him sometimes," Malcolm said. I stood in the doorway. "I know. He made me feel small." "No," I said, "he made you feel seen. You called that small." He closed his eyes. "Maybe that hurt. Maybe it needed to." "I loved you," he said. I did not answer quickly. Because once I would have clung to those words like medicine. Now I examined them like symptoms. "You loved the version of me that made your life easier," I said. "You did not love the part of me that could challenge you." He looked at me. "And now I am done being divided into parts." He nodded slowly. "I am sorry for the lobby." It was the first apology that did not include pressure. So I accepted it. "I hear you," I said. He waited for more. More did not come. The divorce was quiet. I reclaimed my name. Evelyn Hartwell. Not because Pierce was dirty, but because Hartwell had work to do. Malcolm eventually left St. Helena for a surgical position in another state, not a leadership role, a clinical one. I heard he became quieter there, less adored, more careful. Maybe humility finally found a place to enter. Cassandra joined a private hospital network. Vivian Pierce sent me one letter accusing me of ruining her son's destiny. I placed it in the shredder beside expired insurance forms. That felt symbolic enough. A year after the lobby incident, St. Helena held the reopening of the expanded Grace Hartwell Children's Center. We added family sleep rooms, a reading corner, a nutrition station, and a small garden where children could sit outside with IV poles and feel the sun. On the morning of the ceremony, I stood in the lobby where Malcolm had fired me. The same glass ceiling, the same marble floor, the same reception desk. Only now, behind the desk, the box of donated blankets had become a permanent program. Every child admitted to pediatrics received one. Volunteers called it the Evelyn box, which embarrassed me, but Nurse Patel refused to rename it. The staff gathered. Nurses, doctors, janitors, residents, volunteers, patients, families. This time when people looked at me, I did not feel exposed. I felt witnessed. Miriam stood near the front, Mr. Ellison beside her. Nurse Patel held scissors for the ribbon cutting. A little boy in a wheelchair asked if he could help. I gave him the scissors with both hands. Before we cut the ribbon, I spoke. My father believed hospitals are not buildings full of machines. They are promises. A promise that pain will be answered. A promise that fear will not be mocked. A promise that money will not decide who deserves dignity. My voice trembled slightly. I let it. For a while, St. Helena came close to forgetting that. Maybe all institutions do if no one keeps watch. But this hospital was built by people who believed care should have a memory. Today, we remember. Nurse Patel cried openly. So did I. Then the little boy cut the ribbon crookedly, and everyone clapped like it was perfect. Because it was. Later that evening, after everyone left, I walked through the hospital alone, past surgery, past pediatrics, past the chapel, past the lobby. The night staff moved quietly. Machines beeped. Elevators opened and closed. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere a nurse laughed softly. Somewhere a family waited for news that could change their lives. Hospitals never sleep because suffering does not keep office hours. I stopped outside my father's old office. The plaque now read, Dr. Jonah Hartwell Memorial Ethics Room. I opened the door. Inside, we had created a space for staff to pause, pray, think, or simply breathe after hard cases. No executives, no meetings, no strategy calls, just chairs, soft light, tissues, tea, and silence. On the wall was my father's sentence. Treat the disease, see the person. I sat there for a long time. And for the first time since his death, I did not feel like I was trying to protect his legacy alone. I felt like I had entered it. People often ask me if I regret not telling Malcolm about the hospital earlier. The honest answer is no. Because I did not know. But even if I had known, I understand now why my father waited. He did not want me to be respected because of ownership. He wanted me to know whether I was respected without it. That truth hurt. But it saved me. Malcolm showed me who he was when he thought I had no authority. Cassandra showed me what she valued when patients had no voice. Vivian showed me what she respected when she thought I was only useful decoration. Even some board members showed me how easily kindness can be dismissed until paperwork gives it power. That is the sad truth about many rooms. People do not always hear compassion until money repeats it louder. But once I had the power, I made a promise to myself. I would not become the kind of person who needed to humiliate others to feel tall. I would not fire people in lobbies. I would not use ownership like a weapon. I would not confuse revenge with repair. Because my father did not leave me St. Helena so I could rule it. He left it so I could guard it. My husband said, "You are fired," in front of the whole staff. He thought that sentence ended my place in the hospital. Instead, it ended his illusion that titles are stronger than truth. He thought I was an employee he could dismiss. He did not know I was the daughter of the man who built the foundation, the trustee of the mission, the owner of the doors he walked through every morning. But the greatest inheritance was not the hospital. It was the lesson. When people think you are powerless, they speak freely. Listen. When they think you are replaceable, they act carelessly. Watch. When they shame you in public, do not rush to defend your worth to people committed to misunderstanding it. Stand still. Place the badge on the desk. Walk out with your dignity. Then open the envelope. Read the documents. Call the lawyer. Return not as revenge, but as truth. Because one day, the room where they embarrassed you may become the room where everyone finally learns your name. And when that day comes, do not waste it proving you are powerful. Use it to protect the people who still are not.